I get asked that all the time. Everyone's like, why would you leave Coke? It's Coca-Cola. It's such a great company. And I loved it there. But I was 10 years in that company.
Why do people call you the sunny data person?
So simply put, data storytelling is a skill transforming complex data analysis into a compelling narrative that triggers the emotions of your audience and influences to make decision making.
So how can finance teams tailor their stories to different audiences?
So I would say first thing is, sometimes I find graphs just overcomplicated in terms of, remove the clutter, remove the legends, remove the unnecessary text, remove multicolors.
Why is that?
Humans can't.
I wonder whether they'll get to a point where the GPT is curious back to you and actually asks you all the questions. Maybe I've not used it for a while, but
Have you asked ChatGPT to ask you questions on what you're missing?
no.
Try it. You can be 20 minutes in, you've presented all the facts, but the forgetfulness curve is that by the time the people walk out of the room, they've forgotten 50% of what you presented to them.
Rosanne, good afternoon.
Hi Neil, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
As a starting point, can you tell us who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. My name's Rosanne Werner and I'm the CEO of Data and AI Mindset Culture Company at XcelerateIQ. So I help companies with their data and digital enablement through a people-first approach. So there's a big data and AI value gap where companies are investing in a lot of data and technology, but there's also a big gap in terms of the capabilities of the people. They're afraid of the data or the technology and they're just not using it. So the investment's been made on data and technology, but the ROI on the value realization isn't there. So I help companies with a people-first approach to enable that usage of the data and technology to bring that value.
And thinking back in your career, how have you got to being where you are now and doing this role?
So I'm originally a chartered accountant. So I started off with Deloitte in Sydney and I worked at a finance transformation role at a big biotech firm. And then I decided to do the whole work abroad thing. I came over to London. I'm still here after 18 years, but I did some finance transformation for oil and gas, mining, and for the last 10 years at Coca-Cola. And I did finance transformation there. And that was when they built up their data and analytics team and they saw what I did with the finance transformation and they were like, look, we want that people first approach with the digital and data transformation. So I've finance background, ended up in tech, but it's the whole people transformation that I'm most passionate about.
And what was the sort of catalyst and why did you sort of move from the corporate world to coming along and setting up your own business?
I get asked that all the time. Everyone's like, why would you leave Coke? It's Coca-Cola. It's such a great company. And I loved it there. But I was 10 years in that company and all the signs were pointing that way in terms of there was a big gap in the market on data and AI, culture and mindset, a part that I was so passionate about. And financially I was set up to take a bit of a break and try and test this venture. And I was like, why not? Life is short. What could possibly go wrong? So, if it didn't happen, I can always go back to corporate, give this a go. So I have.
And you're a year in, is it? Just over?
A year in.
What are your kind of reflections so far? Obviously, we've taken that leap 3 years ago. You're a year in. So
yeah.
How is it for you so far?
It's blown me away in terms of connecting with people that was outside of my network, the support and encouragement I've had from them, how people have seen that gap and goes, it's a niche and you should continue on with it, especially with that legacy you've built at Coca-Cola. You can really take that to other companies and really make a difference with other companies. So it's been a really good journey and not just in the UK and Europe, but over in the US and Asia as well. So it's been a really good response and really encouraging to have that response.
Did you plan for sort of the longer term? Like for you, is this something you want to grow and bring more people in and sort of become a real, full on venture and business as well?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Exciting.
I think I think it's something that we will need to continue to invest in, especially with AI developing. How do we nurture the human element as AI develops? And also with like how AI is advancing so quickly, how do we nurture the timeless skills for this technology as well as the emerging technologies going forward? So things like curiosity thinking, creativity, critical thinking, I call them the soft power skills in terms of these are the things that we need now with AI, and we'll still need them in the next emerging technology because it's not something that technology can replace.
Why do people call you the sunny data person?
So at Coca-Cola, we did this insights personality assessment, and you answer a whole bunch of questions and it came back with what your personality type is like. And I was rated blue and yellow, which are the opposite sides of the spectrum. So blue being analytical data, most of the finance people were blue. And then yellow is more creative and inspirational. So I was on opposite sides of the spectrum. And then when they got the whole finance team to stand around the circle, I was like this unicorn sitting out on the edge. But this is where this role and what I'm doing matches so well with that personality. I didn't know it at the time, but now I'm looking back, it's like it's the inspiration and the data side of things that I'm actually doing exactly what my personality says I should do.
Yeah, brilliant. So tell us what is data storytelling?
So simply put, data storytelling is a skill of transforming complex data analysis into a compelling narrative that triggers the emotions of your audience and influences to make decision making. So there's a real science behind data storytelling. So when you'll be presented with facts, the right side of your brain lights up. And that's the information processing side of things. But when you're being told a story, the MRI scan shows that your whole brain lights up. So your senses and emotions all lights up. So that's why stories are remembered 22 times more than facts, because more of your brain's lit up, more of your channels are open to absorb the data. And then when you've got emotions connected with the data, it puts it into the subconscious. And people remember that data, and it's more relatable. And there's a neuroscience guy called Antonio Damasio that did a test on a guy who damaged the frontal lobe, and that's where your emotions that's responsible for your emotions. And the guy was a successful guy. He had a happy married life, a successful career. But after this incident, he was able to still generate ideas, but he couldn't make decisions. So he couldn't make day-to-day decisions in terms of what drink would I like, what food do I want to eat. So he did a test on this guy and gave him some images that should trigger some emotional reaction. He had none. And the studies show that there's a direct link between emotions and decision making. So when you're telling stories, you're triggering that emotion side of things, which means people make decisions based on the emotions, and then they try and find the logic to back it up. And so storytelling with data is really powerful because you're connecting with your audience. Your audience trusts you with the oxytocin triggers that are there. And then also they remember what you have said to them because of their brain, more of their brains lit up than just the one side.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's also something we tell a lot of people about when they're preparing for interviews, because actually that storytelling is the part that really gets you the job. It's how do I connect with the person on the other side of the table, create that emotion, and become the memorable person through what is often a competitive process. It's exactly the same kind of methodology and mindset, I guess.
Exactly. Or it's like when we're in the movies. When you're watching the movies, like your heart's pounding, and you can relate to the key person on the movie, and it's that connection, that neuro coupling that you end up experiencing what that key character is experiencing, and that's when you're telling stories, your audience resonates with you, and that's that same chemical is there.
Yeah, I think they say every Hollywood movie has the same formula, which is there's something bad happens, there's a hero.
Yeah.
There's they come along and save the day, and that's kind of what makes you buy into the movie and that kind of happy ending, I guess.
Exactly.
So how can finance teams tailor their stories to different audiences?
So I would say first thing is understand your audience. Ask the right questions of your audience in terms of what is their decision making. Is it a strategic side of things? Are they tactical or are they operational? So then that highlights what are their goals and objectives to cover. And then you want to understand what their technical expertise is. Are they highly technical, so you can use jargons and they won't look at you funny? Or are they non-technical, so you need to lower it down into simple words so that they can understand and relate to it? And the other part is, what's their attitude towards the data that you're presenting to them? Are they skeptical? If they're skeptical, do you need to have backup data to answer their questions? Are they a big advocate of the data, so they trust the data you're presenting to them? Or are they data cautious? So it's a bit of in between. So understanding the audience helps you tailor your approach in terms of what insights do I pull out that resonates with that audience, and then in what way they would like it to be delivered, so you're actually connecting with the audience in that right way.
I was just going to say, how much of your role in terms of when you talk to other companies is just about that, getting the data right in the first place? Because obviously the output's only as good as what's put in. So is that a big part of the role you play in some ways as well? So
usually it's important having a data governance and data management teams in terms of what is good data, and then what are the processes that have been agreed with different functions in terms of the capturing of the data, treating the data as an asset. How do you manage that data as it comes through the line? So from the people that create it, what are the practices to check that it is of good quality? What are the protocols in place to check that data is of good quality, and then also how that mingles in with the rest of the data within the company. So it's really important having that data governance and data management teams within an organization. But as same as that, you can have all those principles, but then you also need that data literacy, data awareness within the organizations to understand what those practices are and what their role to play is in terms of their role to create data that is of good quality.
And what are the other big mistakes you see finance teams, CFOs, CEOs making with data?
A key one that I see is that they think data is a technology problem, that if that the CIO or CTO can solve it. I find data is a strategic business issue. Everyone's got a role to play in terms of the data that they're creating, how they manage data as an asset, how do they use the data for decision making. It's all good having the data, but then if you're not using it, then all that work's gone to waste. So it's not a technology issue. You can scrap the old tool and bring the new tool in, but if your processes and the culture and the behaviors are still in place, you're still going to get bad results out of that, even though you've got a nice shiny tool.
Is that part of what you set out to do is focus, as you say, on the people side and changing the mindset around data as much as it is on maybe more the visualization at the end? It's that people change mentality that you're trying to really focus on as well.
Exactly. And people are people are creatures of habits. We don't change overnight. So how do we break that change down in incremental pieces that they can relate to and be able to change like small acts that can compound over time? So things like, okay, well, if we've got a new dashboard, we're trying to get people to use it. People are scared of new things or change, incorporate it into their day to day. So why don't we go, all right, every time you open your laptop or have a coffee, let's spend 10 minutes on the dashboard, or let's go and spend 10 minutes at the front of the team meeting. Let's do an exploration and see who gets the best insight. So incorporate those little changes over time. So I think it's like 10 minutes a day for 11 weeks. You've embedded it into your routine and it becomes more automatic behavior. Then go, okay, we need you to spend all your life on dashboards now. So it's how do you tap into those behaviors and habits of people? I say, look, if you're brushing your teeth, put a podcast on, listen to something about what are the developments of AIs, keep yourself up to date on that. So how do you habit stack as well? So,
and I guess it's like you say, it's that building that into them, then seeing that it actually adds value as well. So it's like, okay, fine, I'm looking at the dashboard, but now I can see what it's really doing for me in my role. And that's where it becomes a powerful habit, I guess.
Exactly. And the importance of like cross collaboration. So someone might find a really good success story. I found this and I told this audience and this generated extra amount of sales, or we saved X amount. And those sharing of success stories then creates that FOMO pool in terms of, okay, well, what can I do? How can I get into this game? And I'm a big advocate for that, because then people learn better from each other as well. That social learning piece is, we talked about the emotion side of putting things into the long-term memory. But when you're learning in a group, that's when you activate that FOMO, that push in terms of people remember more when they're in a group setting because of the emotions they are feeling at the group, but then also what they're learning in that group setting helps put it into their longer term memory and actually triggers them to act.
Yeah. I presume you've seen a lot of those changes happening. Is that the bit that you really get the kick out of then as a person? Is it that seeing that change happening in those stories? Is that the thing that motivates you, I guess? Yeah,
definitely. It's that light bulb moment that goes off, the light bulb moments, but then the energy that, when they're using the tools and the data and it helps enhance their job, they get to do more things that are more valuable to them, or the trickier things, the more complex things that gives them more value. And then the sharing of those success stories and then seeing that ripple effect go through an organization. That's the bit where you've got that change at scale that helps with the sleeping well at night side of things, because change is hard, but when you do change at scale and use those little leverages, and people then jump off each other's energy to do that, then that's where you've got that behavioral and mindset and culture change across the company.
Is there any sort of specific things that you can, I don't know how much you can say about your time at Coke in those scenarios, but things where those things just happened and it was just amazing for the organization as a whole?
Yeah. So when we launched the data fluency program, we first set it out for people that were the catalysts in their function. So people that were interested in data, are excited about data, but then also they were the influencers in their areas. So we got those people together across the functions, across the territories, and go, you've been chosen because we know you guys can make an impact. And so we set off the learning program, but then alongside with the learning program, we had a lot of the P2P workshops. So basically last one we had was 200 people across the world in hybrid sessions. So we had people online, people in a room, and we had a cross collaboration workshop on how to solve problems with data, or how do we help change the habits of our teams with data decision making. And the feedback from that was, I spoke to 3 different people from 3 different countries on that one workshop session. I was in supply chain and I worked with someone from marketing, which, they were they were on other sides of the spectrum, but they were like, okay, I get now that when I enter some data in, it has a flow-on effect on this person in this function. So it brings that awareness of the impact of the data that they use and create, and then also the decision-making that goes across all the different functions that eventually, you know, satisfies the overall business goals. So that was really... I loved seeing that many people in a room across the globe. So we had, I think it was 30 people in the UK. We had, you know, 30 people in Belgium, France, and we had the Australia, New Zealand and Indonesian guys styling in as well. So it was really great to see that kind of collaboration of the data catalysts across Coke, sharing success stories, sharing learnings with each other, challenging each other on, well, this worked. How can you implement that in your team? Or actually, I've got this problem. How did you solve this? And that cross collaboration was a real game changer.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Data, and sometimes people think about technology as almost like a bad thing for culture sometimes, but that's a really great example of where actually it can just bring people together and help foster better connections in the organization. Is that a kind of something that you see and you're passionate about as well?
Yeah, especially with AI coming in. Before I left Coca-Cola, I set up an AI collaboration, what we call the masterminds. So it was guides across all different functions, and we were experimenting about how we were going to use AI. It was quite early days in terms of ChatGPT, and we set up a collaboration group, and we had challenges. So one of the guys, it was like a wellness week, and they were like, I put into the prompt a Coke bottle running, and this is the output I got, and shared the output, and that generated a lot of curiosity. What prompt did you use? How did you get that color? So that was the curiosity, and then generated people to then try the tool and get other images themselves. So it's that cross collaboration piece that you can't teach from a textbook, but then when people are sharing their stories and their ways of navigating through problems, where the magic happens.
You mentioned there in one of the workshops of 200 people and across different countries, different cultures. Does the data storytelling piece, is that sort of universal, or does it need to be adapted and finessed for different cultures?
So I say the data storytelling piece is, I think everyone can learn. It's like it's such a powerful technique. It's an actual craft. So I would say the data story technique is like, okay, you've got your data that you've analyzed, and the next step is, okay, what's the story you want to tell here? What's the key problem that you're solving for your audience through this data analysis? And then when you're telling your story, so you've got the verbal storytelling, but then the data visualization is also that visual story. Mm-hmm. So that also needs to, that send and receive message needs to match. So your visualization is also really important in terms of, does your headline tell the insight that you're telling? So that header, within 5 seconds, the audience would understand or not understand what that graph is telling them. And they should be able to understand from that 5 seconds the pain point that this solves and what do I need to act on. So sometimes I find graphs just overcomplicated in terms of, remove the clutter. What's a key insight that you want to visually point your audience to, and your story that you're telling with that emotional connection should marry that visualization and the insights from the visualization to then the story you're telling them. So I would say with visualization is remove the clutter, like remove the legends, remove the unnecessary text, remove like multicolors. Mm-hmm. And the other one is no tilting. So you should be able to read the graph and not have to tilt your head. Mm-hmm. And then I guess probably a pet hate's probably 3D graphs and pie charts. Is like they say leave pie charts for dessert, and there's a good reason for that in terms of
why is that?
Humans struggle to identify, quantify numeric with angles. So especially if you have more than maybe 3 different slices, then it's really quite hard to compare the last couple of slices that are really quite small and all that stuff. So they're like, if you've got more than 3 slices, you shouldn't use the pie graph. So the visualization side of things is really hard to compare and quantify with the pie charts. So depending on what you're trying to use, they usually say save the pies for dessert.
I was just thinking you must be like the worst person to do a presentation to as well, because you're constantly going, there's too many lines, there's too many this, there's too many that. Do you find yourself sort of picking holes in people and going...
I always go, what's the key message you're trying to ask here? What's the key message you're trying to answer here? And within 5 minutes, have you captured your audience? And that goes with the storytelling as well. In 5 minutes, have you hooked your audience in terms of the key problem to solve? And you're here to solve their problem.
Is that a big part of then what you're doing when you're working with companies as well? It's of course it's the data piece, but it's also the working with the leadership to understand how they're going to communicate this message and actually ensure that those positive habits and things are created as well.
Yes, exactly. So I would say change comes from the top, and then leading from the top, and then having your catalyst influencers to help bring that change from the bottom up. With the storytelling piece, you mentioned like Disney film, the movie films, and you've got that structure in that whole beginning, middle, and end. So your beginning is like, well, what's your hook? What's that 5-second hook? Have you got your audience within that 5 seconds? And then you've got what we call like the rising event. So you've done all this analysis, and you go, well, Fanta sales have dropped 60% in the last 6 months. That's your hook. You've got your CFO and your CEO is just going, oh, hang on. And then your rising event is, okay, through the analysis, what we have found is that there's an increase in the younger generations that are moving away from traditional fizzy drinks. So they're more health conscious. They want to be healthier. And then your climax, your problem to solve is like, okay, yes, the younger generations have not bought fizzy drinks because of the health conscious decisions. And then the recommendation is like, okay, well, we need to focus on low or zero sugar, natural ingredients. We need to get the younger generation back into the market. How do we change our marketing strategies to get them back in? And then your recommendation is like, okay, what's your distribution strategy? What's your innovation strategy? What's your marketing strategy? So you've got your hook, your beginning, middle, and end, and then you take them through that journey. I mean, the character there is your younger generation. So how do you get the audience hooked into, oh yes, well, I've got a young daughter, and she and her friends, they drink fruit juice as opposed to fizzy drinks because they want to be more healthy. So
that's another podcast right there. How much is also, so you've got you've got your hook and you've got your data visualization, and how much also is kind of just repetition of the message as well to kind of embed it? Because I think, in one ear out the other is, and some people have better memories than others on things. And
yes,
is that important?
Well, have you heard the saying that people need you to be told 7 times in different mediums before the message lands? And I think that's also that repetition piece is really, really important with the data fluency side of things, in terms of, okay, you've been taught some statistical concepts, and then like you've learned it the first time, the second time, third time, and then you relate it to certain relatable terms. So someone I was talking to the other day was like, okay, well, what's mode? I learnt that in 10th grade, and it's like, well, mode is how often, how frequent a value has appeared in a data set. And then like, okay, well, how does that work? And it's like, with the Coca-Cola example, you have what's people's favorite drink? And then that mode piece is like, okay, well, this has appeared X amount of times, so this is the favorite drink because it appeared so many times. So it's like the repetition in terms of the concept, and then relatability, then how do you implement it into your day-to-day is crucial. And then that social aspect in terms of you've learnt it, you've applied it, and then you hear someone else talk about it, that's another different medium.
Yeah, brilliant. Have you got any other sort of actionable tips, without giving away your whole toolkit, any other actionable tips for your potentially CFOs and senior finance professionals listening to this, wanting to get their story across?
Yeah, so I would say find out where your team's at in terms of storytelling. Are they there? And then also get feedback from your audience or even with each other in terms of, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Have I got too much on the slide? It's cognitively too much for someone to comprehend. How's your storytelling technique? And that piece is that you need to work on and practice to really get your hook right, your emotional connection right, and then really landing the aha moment or the recommendations. Because then when people weave the facts with emotions and they make the data more relatable, more memorable, that's when people would act on the recommendations that you're suggesting to them. Mm-hmm. So I think getting that feedback as well is good in terms of, okay, what can you do better and continuously improve on that. That's the whole curiosity side of things and the critical thinking side of things to bring back in.
I was going to say, how important do you think it is that organizations start to adopt AI now, even though it's relatively early still in its journey and it's constant change, right? So it will be different again in 12 months to what it was 12 months ago in its earlier stages. So like for you, how important is AI to organizations generally?
It's very important to get stuck in now, but in a safe and responsible manner. So I think that ethical and safe usage of AI is very important, but it's also important to get your workforce experimenting with the different models. The different models have different personalities, so find the model that provides the results that you want. And then the whole prompt engineering side of things, this is a skill that's been quite new recently. But if you don't try it, you won't learn how to craft a prompt properly. We talked about the hook and the rising action. It's the same as creating a prompt in terms of what tone would you like it to come out to use? What structure do you want it to come out with? Who's your audience? What inputs are you putting in? So you go from people that are putting in 3-word prompts and then saying, it doesn't work, park it aside, to people that go, no, I want to continue getting the best result out of this, and then generating a quite good tailored 400-word prompt, and the results are better because they've instructed the AI on how to get that answer for them. And that's developing those skills to creating the prompts, learning by sharing what worked, what didn't work, trying it out. So I always say you can't learn how to ride a bike by reading a book. You need to get on the bike. So get on the bike with the AI, test it. I got my 70-year-old mother using it the other day. She was writing out her notes for the doctors, and I was like, well, I'll take a snapshot of this, and I turned it into her handwriting into text, and I asked her, what do you want to do with it? She goes, I want to create some notes for my doctor. So I was like, okay, as a patient, create some notes for the doctors, and it did it really well. And my mum and dad want to go to China to live for a little bit, and they were like, oh, we can't do this with the doctors there. I go, translate this to Chinese and read out loud. And she was going to my dad, okay, let's book the tickets now.
Wow.
So that's a 70-year-old. But you need to make the use cases relatable for the people, and then lower the barriers to start. And then once they've started and they've got the use case, and that curiosity kicks in. But
I'm trying to think if ChatGPT and others are curious back. Like I know that when you build a custom GPT, there's almost like a model, isn't there, that it will question you. How do you want the tone? How do you want this? But within the when you're just prompting straight into ChatGPT, it's not so much, is it? It relies on you being curious. I wonder whether they'll get to a point where the GPT is curious back to you and actually asks you all the questions. Maybe I've not used it for a while, but
have you asked ChatGPT to ask you questions on what you're missing?
No.
Try it. One of the things I've used was like, okay, well, this is a prompt. This is the output. Can you tell me what questions I should be asking you to fill in the gaps? And that was really quite,
wow.
Yeah. It goes, well, you know, you're missing what's your target audience, or what format do you want to use? How long do you want it? Do you want a 1,000-word response, or do you want a 300-word response? So it's kind of having that brainstorming piece with ChatGPT that then helps you tailor your prompt as well.
Wow. What do you see the future of AI generally in work? I mean, it's a really big question, isn't it, right? That everyone's asking, is it going to take our jobs? Is it going to do this? There's a real sort of sometimes a fear around it. But what does it look like for you, the future?
I feel AI can help enhance our work. So enhance our work and complement the human aspect that it can't replace. So how can we use AI to do the repetitive tasks, the boring tasks, the tasks in terms of, so for example, we were talking about medical before. How can AI help identify patterns, so that the whole pattern recognition and images? And so your medical staff are spending more time on solving the more complex issues, a bit more the grey areas than the bulk of the work. They've freed up time to do the more meaningful work. And I think for people on a day-to-day basis is also, how do I get AI to do the grunt work of summarising notes after a meeting, and then actually spending the time on doing the actions after the meeting? So what are the aspects? So look at your daily routine. What are the repetitive tasks that AI can do and free up time so you can focus on all the valuable things? So, and I think it's important for companies to also understand and nurture the human element that AI can't take, and really then help upskill and reskill their staff on the things that AI can't replace. So we're talking about the more complex issues and understanding the right inputs to put into AI. So how do we help staff to understand the bias in data? How do we clean up the data to remove the biases in data? How do we train models so that it doesn't have the bias that we have in our languages and stuff like that? So
exciting. Optimistic then for the future and what it'll enable the workforce to achieve, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
What do you just back on the storytelling piece? I think a lot of people that we would speak to are on the finance side. Some are more naturally introverted, and then obviously there's some more extroverted people, and potentially for some storytelling comes more naturally than for some than others, and tone and. I'm very handsy, using that as part of your message, your body language, all of that side of things. I know this is probably bleeding away from sort of data and the storytelling, but I'm interested to know any thoughts on that, or any tips for people who maybe not such natural storytellers. Yeah.
With the storytelling technique, I think you can craft a story even just on paper. Right? What is craft a story in terms of what's a story you want to tell, and what are the insights? What's the hook? What's the beginning, middle, and end? What's a climax? And then the other piece then is how do you practice? And how do you practice either by recording yourself and then looking back at yourself? There's also AI tools that's voice coach on Teams to identify how many ums and ahs or non-inclusive words that you've used. So you can use AI to give you that feedback, but then also if you record and give yourself the feedback, and then also ask your teams to give you the feedback, it's good to, it's practice as well. You can't be a storyteller overnight. It's perfecting that skill of writing out a story in a way that you've got that storytelling technique structure, but then it's also then the delivery of it. And that delivery side of things is something that takes practice, learning, and continuous learning and feedback. So it's being open to that as well. I think when I first started, I recorded myself. I hate looking at myself in the video, but I looked at myself in terms of how I spoke and how I used pauses and how I used my hands to carry a story across. And then looking at what best practices look like, lots of YouTube videos and tech talks on how good speakers speak. And then going, okay, well, what did I like about that? What's that one bit that I can incorporate in my next presentation? The habit piece. What's one bit I can incorporate in my next presentation? What's one bit that I can, instead of using ums and ahs, pause?
Yep.
So what's one bit that you can do in your next presentation? Review yourself back. And then what's another thing that you can incorporate in? And over that practice of time and incorporating in habit, it builds that over time.
So flexing that muscle and practicing it is important and something people should consider.
Exactly.
There's no quick wins, is there?
Afraid not. And I think it's, again, it's going away a bit from the data storytelling piece, but I think it's a day-to-day thing for us is speaking to people who are going for an interview or going on a meeting, and again, just trying to have, people call it elevator pitch, whatever it is, to be able to succinctly talk about who you are, what you do, what you've done, and why you're here in 90 seconds is a skill that you can practice and perfect. But a lot of people don't do that and end up 20 minutes later having told you their life story and everyone's fallen asleep. And that's where in terms of the storytelling, the data storytelling, you can be 20 minutes in, you've presented all the facts, but the forgetfulness curve is that by the time the people walk out of the room, they've forgotten 50% of what you presented to them, and 95% by the end of the week. So it's identifying, or someone's giving you that feedback and go, look, try this next time, or you yourself go, well, what could I have done better next time? And then just incorporating that little shift of change and then building that over time. Yeah, fantastic. Is there, so if anyone wanted to get in touch, Rosanne, with you in the future and want to talk about data storytelling, etc., what's the best way for anyone who's listening to this to do that?
Yes, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. I like to share my insights on LinkedIn, on a daily basis. So contact me on LinkedIn. There's a lot on LinkedIn as well in terms of little data and AI habits that people can chip in and help, join in the conversation. Some of them are quite controversial. I had one today in terms of is AI truly creating art? So I'm interested to see what the discussions
I'd say
are.
No.
So AI art is quite incredible at the moment. But then sometimes when you think about what AI is like, oh, it's art based on an algorithm. And so some AI art is like, whoa, that looks like the real thing. But I think as we develop, our eyes will probably get more trained to identify what is real and what isn't as well. Yeah. So
I'm a Luddite. You need paint and a canvas for that.
Yeah.
But that's for you individually, rather than the audience, I guess, who, as you say, if you do this in the style of Van Gogh, whatever, right? It can do it, and it's fascinating because ultimately it's chained off existing data, right? That's the only way it knows what art is and what it's doing.
Exactly.
So I would probably go the other way and say it can definitely create art, but I think the therapeutic enjoyment of art is actually doing the
Still
art.
human.
I'm not sure about the scarcity of it, given it's anyone could potentially go in and say, produce me a piece like Van Gogh and like this and tweak it like that, etc. Is that going to be worth?
Has no value.
$10 million in 50 years, 100 years.
I agree with that.
I suspect not.
I don't think there's the value proposition, but I think I mean, like to the viewers' eyes, there's something there. But didn't a painting recently sell? It was not a painting; it was a piece of art. It was a banana
taped
taped
to a wall.
gaffer taped to a wall for €5 million. So I would say that some AI art might be a level above that.
Yeah, I suppose. Art is in the eye of the beholder.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's a balance between, is it creativity or is it like imitation, like different creativity that's already out there in a different mix.
Yeah.
In terms of that side of creativity, do you know what I mean? It's not new creativity in terms of capturing the paint strokes and stuff like that, but it's creativity in terms of the different mix of other people's creativity in a new form. So
it's fascinating.
I think in the world of AI as it's going now, people are going to actually go the other way when it comes to art and live experiential things, music, etc. They want the human.
They want the real thing. Yes.
I think. But
I completely agree. I think it's just that thing about, it's enjoyable to have a cup of coffee, to meet, to have human interaction. And I sort of hope that AI will enable us as people to do that and to focus more on the human connection and the human stuff in our lives rather than simply spending all of our time in front of computers, right? So in a way, it should be a positive.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Literally, we could talk all day about this stuff, right? So it's been
thank you for having me. It's
really
been great.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Rosanne.
Thank you.
Big soon.